Hey, what is up, folks, and welcome to the very first episode of the Beginner's Guide. This is actually going to be a buyer's guide for Fender Eliminators, so stick around if you want to know a little bit more about what to expect when looking for one, what to expect when installing one, pros and cons, as well as price ranges that you could possibly see out there on the market. Pro number one, if you can compare these two, the OEM Fender is just a big, hideous, nasty looking thing, let's be honest. When you look at the aftermarket one, it's just a lot more low profile and overall just tidies up the very back of your bike for a cleaner look. And there's also a good chance that the light that illuminates your license plate is also brighter from the aftermarket product than the one that comes on your bike from the factory. Okay, pro number two, let's talk about weight savings. Now, I'm not going to say that it's going to be substantial, but it does help and it does add up. If you think about all the weight that you're going to be putting onto your adventure bike, on your luggage, you're going to have sleeping bag, tent, maybe a pillow, you've got maybe a camp chair, cooking stuff, food, water, extra fuel, tools, and whatever else it is that you bring to your camp. That's quite a bit of weight. So if you can do anything at all to help offset some of that weight by doing mods just like this that also give you other benefits such as saving weight, I think that's going to be a big positive in my opinion. Pro number three is it's a relatively inexpensive modification compared to all the other ones you might be doing on your bike. The one that I got was $25 shipped to me from eBay. It also came with an LED light, which is really nice. And overall, I'm pretty happy with what it is that I got for my $25. As far as price ranges go, you can expect to spend somewhere between $25 to about $70. I've seen them as high as $120, I believe. There's a possibility if you buy something that is a little bit on the cheaper side, just like I did, you can come across a few problems. There's one particular hole that was a little offset. It was an easy fix. All we had to do was just use a step bit to drill the hole out slightly bigger, and then everything worked out just fine after that. The other thing that we discovered was that this kit didn't come with any hardware, which isn't really a big problem because you can just use the hardware that came off of your original Fender. You do have to pay attention to the bolt in the very back. That one has to be just a touch shorter, and I explained that in the install video if you want to check that out after this. It just so happened that Brent had extra hardware that came off of some other mods, and it was the perfect size and length that we needed in order to make everything work just fine. And the last thing that I wasn't a huge fan of were the wires that came with the aftermarket LED light. They were somewhere between, I think, 24 to 26 gauge, which is really, really thin, and connecting them to the OEM plugs for your bike are, I think, 18 gauge. And so it's not a deal breaker, it's not something to be concerned about, it's just a bit more of a pain in the butt when you're working with wires that are two completely different gauges and the differences are pretty substantial. There was also a modification that I wanted to do to the plate, and that was to drill a hole to match up to the drainage hole on the back of the bike. I thought that it would be a much cleaner way to run the wires of the LED light through the drainage hole and into the area where you would connect the wires together. And last but not least, pro number four is it's a relatively easy install to do. And really the most difficult part of the install is getting the wires to connect, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. And lastly, the cons. There's really only one that I can think of, and I wouldn't even go as far as to call it a con or a bad thing, is that the modification itself is just an aesthetic one. It makes the back of your bike look cool, but it's not going to do anything for you with your performance. You're never going to feel it in the throttle, and you're never going to see it in your MPGs. So I would say that's probably like the one thing that is not a positive to the modification. So for some of you who may not necessarily care about the way that the back of your bike looks, you can save that money and allocate it to another modification on the bike that means a lot more to you. Or you can just go bare bone stock on the bike and then just put it in your gas tank so you can ride some more. To sum it all up, if you are in the market for a Fender Eliminator, these are the four things you want to pay attention to when shopping for one. Number one, does it come with a light? If you want to keep your bike street legal and you don't want to deal with being pulled over for not having a light for your license plate, then make sure that it comes with one. If it does not, don't panic. You can also use the one that comes off of your OEM Fender. Number two, how exactly is the new Fender going to be mounted? If it only requires one bolt to mount, then it does leave behind a hole. And this is where the original wires ran through on the bike for your OEM Fender. Some riders are concerned about that because now you have an open hole that will allow dirt, dust, and water to get into. And so if that's an issue for you, then make sure that the new Fender comes with a blocking plate. If it doesn't, you can always manufacture your own with plastic or maybe like a sheet of metal or something like that. If you don't care about that, then don't even worry about it. If it requires all 3 bolts to install, pay attention to where exactly the wires are supposed to be ran into. You're either going to run the wires into the drainage hole like I did, or you're going to run the wires into the original area that your OEM Fender used. Number 3, does it come with hardware? If it comes with 3 bolts, then you may notice that one bolt is shorter than the other, so that's the one that needs to be mounted at the very back of the bike. If you use a longer bolt, what you might notice that it'll run all the way up through the bike and then make contact with something back there, and it won't completely seat itself all the way inside. So you're not going to have a nice flush bolt if you do that. Make sure that you use the shorter bolt if it comes with one. If it doesn't come with any hardware at all, no problems. You can use the OEM bolts that came off of the bike. You just have to cut one shorter, and I would say maybe 1/4 of an inch should be plenty in order for you to get everything to seat properly. If you decide to buy bolts instead, then the size is either going to be an M6 by, I would say, 1/2 an inch or 3/4 at the longest, or you can also go with a 1/4 28 by 1/2 an inch or 3/4 inch in length. And number 4, how exactly will those wires be connected to your bike? Some companies will provide you with butt connectors, or maybe even have them come with pin connectors. You can also go out and buy those cool heat shrinking connectors. So it's all completely up to you how you want those connected. When you watch the install video, you'll see that mine didn't come with any connectors at all, and even though I had connectors, I decided to just go ahead and use a lineman splice and then soldered it. Well, that wraps it up for this video. If you got anything out of it at all, please make sure you give me a thumbs up, as well as hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Also, hit the notification bell, that way you can stay updated on all the new videos coming out on the modifications on this bike. If you'd like to further support the channel, you can hit the link down below to buy me a coffee. That's under Master of None 365. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.